Yesterday we mentioned one of the Buddha's quality as Parinibbuta Bhagava, Parinibbanaya Dhammantiseti. After the Buddha has himself attained Nibbana, extinguished all kilesas, he teaches the Dhamma with compassion for the sake of extinguishing kilesas and attaining Nibbana. Only after the Buddha has extinguished kilesas by himself did he teach the Dhamma for the sake of extinguishing kilesas. So he attained Nibbana by extinguishing all kilesas which have been all along his lifetimes with the practice of Satipatthana Bhavana. After having fulfilled with the practice of Satipatthana Bhavana, realizing the 4 stages of path and 4 stages of fruition, he extinguished the relevant or respective kilesas, defilements, and thus became Parinibbuta. First of all, extinguished the kilesas. Thus, he became kilesa Parinibbuta, extinguished kilesas by attaining Nibbana. After that, he teaches the Dhamma with compassion to all beings so that they will also be able to attain Nibbana by extinguishing all kilesas, so that they also will become kilesa Parinibbuta. So yesterday we talked about this and explained this both from a theoretical and practical aspect about this Parinibbana, which is the responsibility of the Buddha, by which he teaches all beings to be free, to extinguish the kilesas. He gave the method, and only after one has attained Nibbana, or one has extinguished kilesas, will one be able to guide others and teach others to extinguish kilesas and to become Parinibbuta, which is realistic. As for the Buddha, with the realization of the first supramundane path, he was able to eradicate wrong view and skeptical doubts out of these 10 kinds of defilement to the point of no return, and also the apaya-related greed, hatred and delusion. Greed, hatred and delusion, which will pull you down to the states of loss, were also eradicated. So that there's no false belief as regards the realities of mind and body, believing in the existence of person, being, individual, man, woman, self, individual self, and so on, in respect of the realities of mind and body. There's no more false view. Because he discovered the truth, he is recovered from the loss of direction, so to speak, so that he was able to understand the directions properly. And because he understood the truth, he had no more skeptical doubt about the truth, and he was free from the apaya-related gross forms of greed, hatred and delusion, or the greed, hatred and delusion which would pull one down to the states of loss. And with the continued practice, realizing the second stage of supramundane path, he was able to weaken further these gross forms of greed, hatred and delusion and other hindrances to progress. And with the realization of the third path consciousness, anagami, he was able to eradicate the remaining kamicchanda, sense of desire, and Vyavada, Nirvana, hindrances of ill will, which have not been eradicated in the previous path consciousness. And at the realization of the final path consciousness, Arahata Mega, he was able to eradicate and extinguish all the remaining defilements. At the moment of the practice of insight, one is able to overcome on a temporary basis these defilements which have been all along with us, and with the realization of the path consciousness of the Noble Ones, then one is able to eradicate the respective forms of defilements. And with the realization of the fruition consciousness, it further extinguishes like extinguishing the fires. And with the Ariya, the fruition attainment of the Noble Ones, the respective defilements are said to be extinguished without remainder. This is how one becomes Parinibbuta, having attained the Nibbana. And of course there is much to talk about this Parinibbuta. Therefore, as for the Bodhisattva, the Buddha to be, he was able to eradicate these defilements which have been all along his lifetimes as would-be Buddha or Buddha to be. The defilements which had undermined him, which had tormented him, persecuted him, and burned him all along the lifetimes. And with the realization of the path consciousness, they are no more able to undermine him or persecute him. When one is overcome by defilements, one becomes wearied and tormented, persecuted. Now with the eradication or with the freedom of these respective defilements, one is not burned by these defilements, one is not undermined, tormented or persecuted by these defilements. They are said to cease to exist. And of course, although the kilesas have been extinguished, the aggregate, that is the body, khanda, remains as a result of the past Dhamma. Kilesas are tormenting. Kilesas has the quality of tormenting those who are not free from kilesas. They will make you feel wearied and tired or undermined. As for the Buddha, there is no such thing, no more defilements which would torment him, so his mind is not wearied, although his body to some extent may not be so much at peace. Because kilesas tend to burn and torment or persecute. As for the Buddha, since he has no more kilesas, he is at peace. Because there is no heat at all. Not only that, as for the kilesas, defilements, indulging in them as a result of defilements, one may commit wrongdoing by body, speech and mind, leading to misery and impurity of the mind. Just as when fire burns, it will leave behind only soot and no white or clean things. So also, when kilesas burn, undermine or persecute one's mind will be left with impurities, so that it will become despicable and miserable. So just imagine for yourself, if you are burned or tormented or overcome by these defilements, how would you feel? What would happen to you? As for the kilesas, while they are happening, they produce heat and they will torment you, and after they have overcome you, you'll be left with impurities and you become degraded. When indulging in greed, you might do wrongdoings by body and speech and mind. And indulging in hatred, you will be committing wrongdoing. And indulging in delusion, also you may commit wrong things. With the result that you will feel remorseful, you will feel remorse, and your mind will become impure. Such is the effect of heat, burning effect of the kilesas. So that there will be no peace at all. In the case of the Buddha, no such thing happens to him because he is free from kilesas. He is at peace. Especially the mind is at peace. Buddha himself understood that these defilements are tormenting, undermining elements, producing unwholesome results. So he understood that they are to be eradicated to the point of no return, and he teaches the Dhamma accordingly to all beings. And as for the defilements, it is said that all sorts of defilement or suffering, namely the existential suffering, old age, disease and death, mind body suffering, and suffering due to lack of fulfillment of one's desires and so on, have the root cause in these defilements. That means all sufferings have the root cause in defilements. Defilements, it thus means it has the effect of tormenting, undermining, so that those who are not free from defilement can become wearied, and they are burned, so that they will suffer. And it's just as when the fire burns, it will leave behind soot and undesirable things, unclean things, impure things. So also the mind will be left miserable and degraded. At the very moment of these kilesas, while one is being overcome by defilements, one suffers in this way. And indulging in them as the aftermath, especially when one indulges in extreme kind of greed, hatred and delusion, one is bound to commit wrongdoing by body, speech and mind. As a result of this wrongful volition, the result will be unwholesome. There will be only unwholesome results as a result of wrong volition, chetanas. Because they tend to torment, undermine, persecute, you'll be left with misery and impurity. That is the result in the aftermath. As for ordinary beings, especially when one cannot depend on the spiritual friends or spiritual companion or teachers called Kalyana Metta, or if one is not able to undertake the practice of Satipatthana, because one is not able to tame or cultivate one's physical, mental behaviors, especially the mental behavior with the practice of Satipatthana, one's mind will not be properly shaped, because one is leaving the mind uncontrolled. For such people, they will be overcome by these defilements totally, all the time. They will be persecuted, tormented, and undermined by these undermining elements, so that both your mind and body will remain impure. So you can just imagine with your own personal experience how these defilements will have effect upon you. However much people may be enjoying worldly happiness due to the progress of science, however much one may be doing well So long as one is not able to cultivate one's mind with the method of Satipatthana, they're bound to be overcome by these defilements all the time, the whole 24 hours a day, fully. And that's why in the meantime they will be overcome by such mental diseases such as tension, stress and depression, leading to social problems which cannot be solved. The Buddha has given the method to solve such problems. Therefore, kilesas are to be abstained, defilements are to be overcome, first with the practice of morality training, sila, sika. And if one is not practicing that, or even if one knows the practice of sila, if one is not practicing it to abstain from unwholesome things, one will be doing all sorts of wrong conduct, such as killing, stealing, sexual misconduct and so on, leading to all sorts of social problems. If these obsessive defilements, known as pariyuttana kilesas, are not overcome with the practice of the way of mindfulness, Satipatthana, then indulging in them, one is bound to commit wrong things. Because these obsessive defilements have been with us all along our lifetimes in the form of latent tendencies. And if one cannot overcome these latent tendencies of defilements with the practice of mindfulness, if one is not practicing insight Vipassana to overcome them, then one is bound to be, these latent tendencies will arise into obsessive ones. From thence to transgressive defilements. In this way, from latent tendencies, it will be translated into obsessive defilements, and thence to transgressive forms, leading to many social problems. And because of all sorts of defilements not being eradicated at the latent tendencies, if one is confronted with the desirable object, there will be likes and dislikes. There will be likes about desirable objects and dislikes about undesirable objects. Because the mind cannot be controlled with the practice of Satipatthana. So that these defilements are bound to torment, persecute and undermine you. Just like the fires burning and producing heat, your mind will be heated. And with this not being satisfied, not liking the undesirable objects, you will be tormented by this dosa, anger or hatred. And as in the case of moha, delusion, it accompanies all sorts of unwholesome consciousness. And when you encounter any object or any experience which may arouse your pride and conceit, you may feel proud and conceited. And then holding on wrong views such as the view of self, individual self, also the view of supreme self also, and such is being, this is how one is tormented or persecuted by these deity kilesas, wrong views. And they will torment you and burn you, so that your mind will be burned, persecuted, impure and degraded. So, and also with these wrong views, some may be committing the sacrificial rites, performing sacrificial rites in order to please the one supreme being they are devoted to. Such also is the result of wrong views and so on. Not being able to differentiate between what is right and what is wrong, one will be overcome by skeptical doubt, vicikesha. Not believing in the truth, he will be undermined by these kilesa, defilement, known as skeptical doubt. They will burn you, torment you, and especially when you are practicing or when you are going to practice the high level discipline or the way of mindfulness, the mind is not energetic. You are not able to practice with ardent energy. You are not wakeful. The mind remains slimy, and you will be overcome by sloth and torpor. Or you may be having distraction. Your mind may be wandering here and there without any control. And then also you may be overcome by the spiritual fearlessness or shamelessness of wrongdoing. Then you don't know how to abstain from wrongdoing, because you are not afraid of it, you are not ashamed of it, and you will be committing such things. And in this way you are said to be overcome by these two unwholesome mental states, namely ahirika, anodapa, shamelessness and fearlessness of wrongdoing. And this you will be tormented, degraded, because they are impure, and they will leave you heated and burnt like the ordinary fires. So, in the world, living in this world, you may be living in high society, you may be rich, and all sorts of things may belong to you. However, if you do not understand or how to practice to overcome these defilements, then you are bound to be tortured or tormented or undermined and degraded by these defilements, so long as you possess these defilements. And because the Buddha sees the suffering of beings, he teaches the Dhamma so that the beings will be able to extinguish the kilesas, so that they will not suffer as a result of these kilesas, with compassionate feeling. So he has this Mahakaruna, great compassion, in teaching the Dhamma, so that beings will be able to overcome these defilements, so that they will be at peace. When these defilements arise in us, there are two, maybe divided into two periods. That is the previous defilement, which has arisen in you, and the later defilements which arise in you. And the previous defilement is said to be the cause for the later defilements, and this later defilement is known as Sankilesa. For instance, about an hour ago, you have had this greed or any other defilement, that is ordinary defilement. After that, in the next hour, this again happens in you, that is greed happens in you. This is known as Sankilesa. So, because this defilement depends or relies, is dependent on the first or former or the previous defilement, it is said to build up momentum and becomes forceful. Hence, it is known as Sankilesa. For instance, when one becomes greedy, and the later hour, this will build up momentum and become forceful, and more greed will happen. And when, in the case of dosa, anger or ill will. If it has happened in the past hour, this will gain momentum into a stronger anger or ill will. In this way, it is known as sankilesa. Just like when you are rowing a boat, the bow is said to be broken. And this has become a habit in you. You've been habituated to this defilement, which will be tormenting or persecuting or undermining you, so that you become wearied and tormented and undermined and degraded. As a result of these defilements, you will not be at peace. And so in the world, if one does not know how to overcome the method of overcoming defilements, and instead one is habituated to these defilements, one is bound to become miserable. And although externally one may appear at peace, but internally one will not be at peace, because one is burned and tormented by these defilements. So, as for the Buddha, he has saved all beings so that the beings will not suffer as a result of these defilements. Hence, his name, it is said, he has crossed over, Teno Tarayam, because he has crossed over, and he became liberated, Muto Mosiyam, and Parinibbuta, he attained the absolute peace, Nibbana, and he teaches the Dhamma so that all beings will be able to attain Nibbana. He has made this vow at the time of his bodhisattvahood, that is Buddha to be, and when he was Buddha to be, he had made this vow. So when he became enlightened as a Buddha, he teaches the Dhamma to all beings so that they will be able to extinguish these kilesas. He made a plan of 24 hours. He rested mostly 4 hours a day, and the remaining 20 hours were devoted full time to do his work, that is, to teach the Dhamma, so that they will be able to overcome all defilements. Because to become a Parinibbuta, after he has extinguished all kilesas, he comes to possess this quality of Parinibbana, total extinction, or Nibbana. Because only when there is the individual who has attained Nibbana will there be such a quality. And as for the Parinibbana or Nibbana, they are of 5 kinds, namely Tadanga Parinibbana or Tadanga Nibbana, that is part-time extinction, part-time Nibbana. And second one is Vikamana Nibbana, distancing, realizing Nibbana by distancing the heat of defilements, keeping at a distance, not yet totally eradicating. In the case of the third one, Sabocheda Parinibbana, eradication to the point of no return, cutting off all defilements. And by cutting off all defilements, one realizes Nibbana. The fourth one is Patipasati Nibbana or Parinibbana, that is repeated extinguishing of defilements and realizing Nibbana, or realizing Nibbana by repeated extinguishment of defilements. And the fifth and last one is Nisarana Parinibbana or Nisarana Nibbana, total liberation from suffering or from defilements. These we shall discuss tomorrow, both from the theoretical and practical aspects.